What's important to me is the next picture, the picture they haven't taken yet. That's what I'm looking for, something that is about loneliness and love and the way we are today. You know, there is a touch of humanity. The touch of humanity is what drove me. We weren't conscious that we're creating great art. You know, we're just photographing and photographs. The word art was out of our vocabulary.
Hi there. It's surprising how many of Bruce Davidson's pictures one knows but doesn't necessarily attribute to him. He's been photographing seriously since the 1950s, and his attitude toward his work can be summed up by this statement. Wherever I find my camera, it's sacred to me that I observe and reflect, even in a personal way, with my subject. He's always been drawn to long-term documentary projects and sees his pictures as having a cumulative effect. He describes his approach as being similar to that of a serial killer. He's aware that one has to pay one's dues. When he enters someone's life, he feels the responsibility to live there for a while. His photographic path makes for an interesting story, so I'll chart his progress from the time he discovered the medium at the age of 10 until he became a member of Magnum. I'll also take a closer look at some of his most impactful essays and books. He was born in a suburb of Chicago and began taking pictures when he was 10. One day when he was hanging around a basketball game trying to get a chance to play, a friend asked him if he wanted to see how photographs were made. In a red-lit basement room, he watched in amazement as an image magically appeared in the developing tray. He immediately ran home and asked his mother if she would be prepared to empty a closet, and this became his sanctuary. He wrote on the closet door, "Bruce's Photoshop."
I've had this enlarger ever since 1966. I have to be focused. I have to have some reason that brings me to something. And I don't know what it is very often. The meaning of the photographs find me, and sometimes meaning grows. And meaning changes as one lives in their life. Sometimes I go back to photographs I made 60 years ago and find new energy in them, new meaning.
He progressed fairly quickly from a cheap camera to a Kodak medalist given to him by his stepfather. The family moved to a leafy suburb and Davidson spent hours photographing in the woods. He took a picture of baby owls and it won the Kodak high school competition in his region. It's amazing how some life paths just seem to open up if one's awake and motivated. While he was studying at the School of Design at Yale, he set the stage for his next jump forward. As part of his studies, he photographed the Yale football team. Instead of looking at the obvious glamorous side of the sport, he focused on the gritty and grueling reality of what these athletes have to endure. These pictures were picked up by Life magazine, and this development in turn led to his next breakthrough. When he was drafted into the Army, he was initially sent to Arizona. One day while he was mopping out the barracks, his captain was having a haircut in the barber shop and just happened to see the Life magazine spread. He tracked down Davidson, told him to put his mop away and follow him to photograph the general. He became an Army photographer and was sent to Paris. While he was stationed there, he sharpened his artistic skills. He took this really moody and beautifully composed picture called The Widow of Montmartre. He was also keen to meet his hero, Henri Cartier-Bresson, and tracked him down to the Magnum office. A year or so later, having left the army, he was traveling on a bus down Fifth Avenue in New York when he looked out of the window and saw Cartier-Bresson walking along the sidewalk. He quickly jumped off the bus and tapped him on the shoulder. He invited Davidson to meet a group of Magnum photographers, and eventually was welcomed into the club. Like most successful photographers, Davidson was great at spotting a story and also finding a way to develop the project. A picture librarian at Magnum who just happened to be an amateur trapeze artist told him about a visiting circus. So he took a bus to New Jersey, and there he met Jimmy Armstrong. This was the clown who would become central to his Circus series. Davidson said, "I found something in Jimmy that was more than loneliness. It was a story about surviving." They became friends, and Davidson would return to take more pictures whenever the circus came to town. After reading a newspaper article about a gang fight in Brooklyn, Davidson headed off to make contact with the local Irish gang, the Jokers. Even though he was a few years older than these guys, they accepted him, and for a few months he would hang out with them on street corners, in the local candy store, and he joined them and their girlfriends on a trip to the beach at Coney Island. This shot was used on the cover of Bob Dylan's album Together Through Life. The Brooklyn Gang series has become a powerful record of post-war youth culture in America.
I find my way into the inside of a life. And in some ways, I don't leave. I was very close to this group of teenagers. They were poor, they were sad, they were violent, they were sexual, they were full of life. I saw the reality, how poor the families were in that part of Brooklyn. There's working class. There was nothing for them in the community. There was a lot of alcoholism. There was a lot of drinking, and then later drugs and drinking. See, I was able to get pictures that were important because I was close and I stayed longer. They're not so much about a gang, because that's just a word. It reaches a universal idea. There's something every teenager, every person can feel. A sense of isolation, a sense of depression, a sense of life itself. That's what those photographs are really about.
A significant project developed out of a chance conversation that he had with his Welsh sergeant while he was in the army. Davidson had asked him where he would send his worst enemy, and the sergeant had answered Cwm Carn in Wales. In 1965, he was commissioned by a magazine to photograph Carnarvon Castle, and took this opportunity to visit the mining village. He was particularly impressed by small rituals that people performed to maintain their humanity and dignity within these bleak surroundings. Symbols of cleanliness are found throughout this essay. An image of a woman down on her knees, scrubbing her front step on the pavement outside her home. A miner bathing himself in a tin bath in front of a fireplace in his living room. And a bride's wedding dress contrasted against the grimy valley in the background. In this photograph, a coal-stained miner holds his infant child, dressed from head to toe in white. The tender scene emphasizes the chasm between the innocence of youth and the harsh daily realities of adulthood. He wasn't just trying to show the people's will to be free of dirt. He used this symbol to portray a transcendent sense of purity and spirituality. Commenting on Kumkan, Davidson said, "I thought it was so beautiful, but also devastatingly awful."
One of my best bodies of work, I feel, is Welsh miners in 1965. Well, I uncovered the miners in color, and they have a very interesting effect on people because their faces were flesh, but it was also full of coal. So the combination of coal and flesh gave it a dimension, a meaning that I didn't have before.
He's produced so many strong bodies of work, so it's hard to choose what to focus on next. I'll look at two quite different long-term projects. Having finished an in-depth look at the civil rights movement, he wanted to move on to photographing East Harlem. He said, "Poverty is kind of sexy. Poverty is photographic. It's what photographers look for." But he wanted to move beyond this approach. His way into this project, East 100th Street, was through a connection of a connection who knew a white minister living and raising his children in Spanish Harlem. But that only got him up to the first step. He then had to get permission from the Citizens Committee. He attended a meeting with them, and they told him, "We have photographers coming through here all of the time. But they come and they go, and we never see the pictures, and we never see anything change." He managed to convince them that his approach was going to be different, and he kept on returning to the community over the next 2 years. He once said, "I'm better seeing on the dark side of things than I am on the light." He began photographing the New York subway system in the spring of 1980. The dark, gritty spaces of the rail system lend themselves to black and white, and almost all of Davidson's significant work up until that point, except for the Whale series, had been in monochrome.
The subway was relevant in 1979. It was full of graffiti. It didn't run well. It was unsafe. And I felt compelled to go underground.
You know, when I began to photograph in the subway, I began photographing in black and white because the subway is, to most people, black and white. It's life and death. But as I photographed, I began to see colors in the subway, the color of graffiti, the color of a wall, the color of a face. And these colors became characters. They began to say something about the person and the place. It's a humiliating experience to ride a New York subway. In spite of all that, it's the most incredible place that I've ever been. I would rather photograph in Grand Central Station than in the Grand Canyon.
I found the subway very sensual, even sexual. And so there was a challenge going into the subway because there was a little bit of nervous energy and apprehension because at that time the subway was unsafe, particularly if you're walking around with an expensive camera.
Before he began this project, he prepared himself both physically and mentally. He went on a crash diet and followed a military fitness program. He knew that he had to train like an athlete in order to carry around his heavy equipment for hours each day. Apart from his camera, he took along a strobe and a full battery pack. He also had to conquer his fears. He decided to stand out rather than hide by making his presence felt and not concealing his camera. He rode the rails back and forth night and day for several years. Towards the end of the project, he let his guard down for a minute and got mugged and lost his camera that was worth $1,000. I'll run some more clips of Davidson talking about his subway project. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
subway is an aesthetic experience. I'm not there to prove anything, but to show the multiplicity and layers of life in the New York subway at that time. It was a beautiful experience. It was like I was on a voyage of discovery. I didn't need to go to the Serengeti plain. I could photograph the animals right there in front of me, and they were beautiful. New York Magazine asked me whether I would like to go with a group of subway undercover policemen who dress and act in such a way to precipitate a robbery. This perpetrator came over to take my camera, but the backup police are in the car with me. They look more like a thief than the thieves. Billy, I think his name was, he immediately arrested the guy that was mugging me.